Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
Happy New Year to you and to yours, and thank you so much for starting 2014 with me. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Before we get into the meat of the show, though, there's just some other stuff I wanted to talk about. I'm a little bit unprepared for the evening. I mean, I prepared the show, but after taking last week off for the holiday, I sort of have forgotten where everything is. You know that feeling when you walk into an office and you look around and you go, well, where did I put everything here? I've got this. Where do I keep that? How do all these things work again? I'm sort of reorienting myself with a studio as we get set to kick off the first show of the new year. By the way, thanks to everybody who sent messages in about Rat Dog. I don't know if you were following my Facebook page, but I just posted something about having to run to the emergency room. 4 o'clock in the morning, right? The dog is just, forgive the term, sick as a dog, but a little 3.5 pound toy Yorkie is sitting there just unable to breathe. You know, it just looks like it's about to pass out. Rush to the emergency room in the middle of the night. And she's fine, by the way, doing good, back to 100%, chasing the cat, you know. But I've had more people send me messages. Is Rat Dog okay? Is she going to be all right? It's amazing to see the response. This dog has become famous. And yeah, she's doing fine. She's doing fine. We had a great Christmas holiday. You know, in our family, we don't do a big deal. We just sort of hang out with close-knit family. We exchange a few gifts and have a meal and just relax. But it was really kind of a pleasant unplugging from the rest of everything, which I think is healthy. You know, it's just been such an insane year. And I'm looking at 2014, and it looks to be even more busy in a good way. I'm excited about that. In fact, I just got confirmation that I'm going to be speaking in Arizona. We're going to be doing 4 cities in 3 days, the weekend of February 15th and 16th. We're going to be in Phoenix, Tucson, Sedona, and Flagstaff. I believe I'm still getting the confirmations on the details on that weekend. But you'll be able to see them on the events page at the newly redesigned thethinkingatheist.com website. So if you're in the Arizona area and you want to come out, their free event, it's going to be a ball. And then we're going to be in Charlotte in June, maybe some other cities in North Carolina. I'm working on Amarillo, Texas, an event I can't tell you much about yet, but if it comes together, it's going to be awesome. And so I should have details on that and a whole lot more. So 2014 is already shaping up to be something very, very special. It was a very, very special thing to me when I logged on and saw the statistics for the December downloads on the Thinking Atheist Radio podcast. This show, in 1 month, on Blog Talk Radio and iTunes and Stitcher and all the outlets, was downloaded 1,629,499 times. Over 1.6 million downloads. That doesn't even count YouTube, because I repost the show on YouTube and will continue to do so for the unforeseeable future. I'm not sure exactly how much longer we'll be doing that, but as long as Blog Talk Radio's audio is just terrible, their fidelity is not great. Everything else about them I really like. The quality of the audio feed is not good, so I always post a higher quality audio on the YouTube page. And you can always just go to the Thinking Atheist. So that didn't even count the YouTube downloads for the month of December. And it's just an amazing thing to see all of these people come together and listen to the show and support the show and have so many kind words to say about the show. This show exists and survives and thrives because of you, your participation, your support for spreading the word. Thank you for the donations. Some people, they know that I'm not going to put a subscription on the Thinking Atheist podcast. because I just don't think it's right. I don't want to lock this content behind hey, sign up for, what is it, a normal yearly thing on something like that. I just don't think it's morally right. I don't want to lock this conversation up. I want anyone, anywhere to be able to log on and listen. And so what we do instead is, if you get benefit from the show and you'd like to toss a few bucks via donation, do that. That's cool. And thank you. If you'd rather not, that's cool too. Please listen anyway. You're more than welcome, but you can do all that stuff at thethinkingatheist.com and spread the word. Who knows where we'll go in 2014? 2 million? 2.5? I have no idea, but I am definitely along for the ride. I've really been missing Christopher Hitchens lately. And I'm not into like hero worship. I don't get much into, this person is my idol. That's not really how I feel about it. But I continually feel the loss of the voice of Christopher Hitchens. Even in the times that I disagreed with him, there was no one who was able to communicate the way that he did. And he was just fearless, and he was sort of there for me at a critical time in my own life when I was coming out of religion. And hearing his courageous voice gave me courage. And hearing him challenge the established sacred cows gave me the courage to do so. And yeah, in a lot of ways, he really did inspire me. And I feel the loss of not having his voice anymore. But I was going through some of the books in my closet. I'm trying to organize everything, right? You're doing this stuff for the new year. I'm going to organize all of my books and all of my stuff. So while I had the time off last week, I was going through it. And of course, I come across God is Not Great. And the subtitle is How Religion Poisons Everything, or Why Religion Poisons Everything. And I stopped and I thought, that's something I've heard debated quite a bit, even on our own pages. And it's a valid question. Does religion poison, taint, toxify everything it touches? And throughout the course of the evening, we'll be hearing from Christopher Hitchens some little excerpts from speeches he's given here and there that speak to that very issue.
Religious morality asks us to overcome doubt, to overcome skepticism, to leave it behind, to suspect the faculty that of ours is the most precious of all, the ability to philosophize, the ability to think for ourselves, the ability to challenge existing authority. No, that's all to be distrusted. That could be a temptation. The evil one, it's not an accident, says that it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil that at all costs you must avoid, because anything to do with knowledge could immediately turn profane.
And Hitchens paints religion with a very broad brush, right? Saying at that moment that religion essentially distrusts knowledge, and therefore it is toxic to us because we require knowledge. We require learning, evolving, having better information, knowing more about what makes the universe tick, what makes us tick. That's the ticket to us advancing as a culture, as a society, as a species. Religion, according to Wikipedia's definition, is an organized collection of beliefs, cultural systems, and worldviews that relate humanity to an order of existence. Many religions have narrative symbols and sacred histories that are intended to explain the meaning of life and or to explain the origin of life or the universe. From their beliefs about the cosmos and human nature, people derive morality, ethics, religious laws, or a preferred lifestyle. According to some estimates, there are roughly 4,200 religions in the world. Now, I know you're like me, you take issue with the line that says, from their beliefs about the cosmos and human nature, people derive morality. I'm not sure that the religious implication there works. Merriam-Webster defines religion as the belief in a god or group of gods, an organized system of beliefs, ceremonies, and rules used to worship a god, an interest, a belief, or activity that's very important to a person or a group. How is that a religion? An interest, belief, or activity that's very important to a person or group. I used to play a lot of tennis, and it was very important to me. And I had an interest, and it was an activity And it was not a religion. It's just a poorly defined word in many instances. And our community has had a plethora of varying opinions on whether or not religion is poisonous. It's just amazing to see. Of course, it's not surprising, but it's always refreshing to see all of these different perspectives sort of come down. Terry on Facebook said, I do not believe in absolutes. Religion's not for me, but I've seen some positives come out of religion, such as the sense of fellowship and friendship and hope. Not every religion or church is all bad. Stephen said, I had a friend once who described religion as being similar to a factory built in a small town. The jobs are great, and the money pouring into the local economy does wonders, but how long can the town tolerate the pollution that comes with it? At what point does the town look around and say, the money's great, but we kind of like having water that's safe to drink and rivers and lakes with fish in them? In the past, religion served as a unifying influence that gave communities something to rally behind. Now we can no longer afford the toxic waste that comes with it. Instead of being a source of unification, it's only a source of division. David said, well, I think religion has kept many sociopaths in check. How many times have we seen believers extol the virtues of religion by saying that's where morals come from, or you can't be good without God, or blatantly coming out with, I'd be doing bad things if it wasn't for God. Taylor says, I'd much rather not debate about something said by someone who likes to offend others more than anything else in the world, of course, referring to Hitchens. I'm not a fan of Hitchens, and I believe in the freedom of religion, even if some people choose beliefs that are drastically different from mine. Mike said, I'm willing to grant that those who claim to be helped by religion are either weak-minded or don't give themselves credit for the minds they have. This was a conversation that came up just recently. In the month of December, I wanted us as a community to have the opportunity to do something charitable for other people. Now, we had talked in 2013 about stories like the Rebecca Vitzman story, after the May 20th, 2013 tornado ravaged the city of Moore. We saw people looking to the sky and crying out to God and praying for blessings and protection long after the EF5 twister barreled through the city and killed 24 people and injured hundreds more. And to see these people looking up when they, quite frankly, should be looking toward each other, right? Human solutions to human problems. Well, rather than bitch and moan and nothing else about our problems, I'm convinced that we must, from time to time, come in and really focus on ways to help others. And I've really wanted this community to do that. And we had evidence of that in two amazing ways in the month of December, if I can digress for just a second. The first was we saw the completion of 2 water wells built in Ethiopia, thanks to this community. We did a big fundraiser. We raised, I think, $16,000 for charity water in the spring of 2012. And 2 wells, and in one of the villages, some toilets were also put in as well because it didn't have sanitary bathrooms, And so they put these in, and there's a plaque in front of it. I posted the pictures on Facebook. You can see it. The Thinking Atheist community. It has the GPS coordinates. And they built a kind of this protective wall around this thing to keep the animals away from it. It's going to save 2 hours of walking each way and provide sanitary water to 200 people per village, thanks to the generosity of the people in this community. Look, we could have prayed for the sick and diseased and the starving and the impoverished, or we come together and we say, all right, well, here's an organization that's doing something and we can get behind them. And they're not going in to proselytize and evangelize. They're not going in with an agenda to pound people over the head with a Bible after they feed their stomach and give them clean water. They're just giving them clean water. Let's do something with these people. And so to see those photographs come in of the completed wells was just awesome. I mean, it was an amazing moment. And it's a moment that we can all share, that we can all participate in celebrating. And it gets me excited about whatever we're going to do. I have something coming up in 2014. I'm not sure what we're going to do, but we're going to choose at least 1, maybe 2 worthy organizations, probably secular charities, and get behind them. There was also something else that happened in December that proved that we are about human solutions to human problems. we did a 5 and 5 charity campaign, meaning 5 different days of the week, Monday through Friday, and we chose a different charity every day. On Monday, we did a $1,000 goal for Doctors Without Borders. We had twice that donated. The second day was a $2,000 goal for responsible charity. They were giving out these little kind of holiday, we called them care packets in the slums of India that had hygiene products and just, stuff to help them. Because, they're really living in slums. It's just horrible conditions. We asked for $2,000. And I think each of the kits was like $25 a piece to put together. So we had a goal of $80. We raised almost twice that. So about 150 of those kits went out. It was awesome. Day 3, we raised like $2,500 for the Foundation Beyond Belief. Day 4, over $2,000 for DFW, the Dallas-Fort Worth Atheist Helping the Homeless. They have a tremendously bad homeless problem in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And they're going out and giving them just basic necessities that you and I take for granted. They're going out making a difference. And we were a part of that. And probably one of my favorite examples of the week and of my life. I was brought to my attention by one of our page users. There was a young lady named Ashley who was in need of a double lung transplant, had cystic fibrosis, and was not even expected to live to adulthood. And because she could not pay for, I guess they have to have a certain kind of transportation via jet for her to get to the hospital in time if the organs become available. There's a number of these stipulations that she had to be financially accountable for. She had to pay for herself, and she just didn't have the money. And plus, there's incidental expenses when she gets there. She'll be staying in the region of the hospital for a matter of months, some certain types of equipment. And so she was taken off the waiting list for the double lung transplant. And of course, she had almost no lung capacity at all. And it was brought to my attention that, hey, maybe we could help out. And I checked out the fundraising page at the time, and they were at about $6,600 on a goal to close to $30,000. I think they were looking for $30,000 total. And this is a religious person. You can tell by the language that is often used on this page. People are saying, "I'm praying for you, Ashley," and we'll pray to God. May God bless you. And now you and I are thinking the same thing. We're thinking, and not to be cruel, not to rub salt in it. I'm not saying this to Ashley, but I'm thinking to myself, this is the same God who allowed cystic fibrosis to nearly take the life of a precious human being. This is the same deity who spun the cosmos into existence with a breath and could immediately blink and heal Ashley completely, and does nothing. And yet he is the one who is, when people get desperate, they pray. Now, I'm not knocking him for praying. I understand it. I don't understand it, but I understand it. Does that make sense? I get it. I get where it comes from. And I ask this community, when you donate to this cause, don't make this about making a point. Don't go and donate and say, your God did diddly squat. Here's my gift. I'll do something tangible. This is not our opportunity to go and dance, dance the dance of reason. We may be right in point of fact. The absolute truth is that, she, under the loving arms, under the guidance, under the protection of a divine omnipotent deity, should be whole and healed and perfect and being able to live her life. Right? What father would do nothing to protect a child whose body was being ravaged by cystic fibrosis, or even worse out there? Our job was to go in and just make this girl's day and to provide a solution. So she was at about $6,600. I was hoping we might get close to $12,000. I'd love to see $5,000-$6,000 given. What do you guys think? Let's do what we can for this young lady. This was the final day. And in about 48 hours, we saw the number go from $6,600 to over $23,000. That number may still be going up. I don't know. It just gives you goosebumps, you know. Now, religion, in her case, may give hope, but is it hope that could not come from somewhere else? In fact, looking and praying to the sky, is that as genuine a hope as the hope that might come from medicine? You know, the surgeons who are waiting to transplant new lungs into her body and provide the anti-rejection medication and to nurse her back to health, the support staff and all the people who are going to be caring for her and at her bedside 24/7, and the family members who are helping her to get back up on her feet and start the next chapter in her life. Isn't that a greater hope? Does religion poison this circumstance by distracting people from the genuine, tangible, real solutions and having them chanting mantras to the sky? It's a difficult question to ask, and it's one that's unpopular, especially when people are suffering. You know, when people are at their worst moment and they cry out for help to God, we shouldn't be asking the questions of, are you wasting your time? In a way that we're trying to stomp on their grief or pain, but to nudge them toward redirecting perhaps their energies toward a place that provides true solutions. I mean, does religion genuinely help people? And if they get let's say they get a physiological benefit out of it, like Dr. Andy Thompson was talking about a couple of months ago in one of our podcasts, is that an effect? You know, that euphoria, the placebo effect, whatever, is that an effect that could come from somewhere else? Do we require God or religion in order to get this particular benefit? Is it worth it? Does religion poison everything? Even those instances when we try to cope and or heal after some difficult situation. It's a complex question. I look forward to hearing your perspective. Let's start with area code 806. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who is this?
Hi, this is JV.
Thank you so much for calling the show tonight. Does religion poison everything is the question on the table tonight. What do you think?
Personally, I would have to say yes, but I think the ignorance is bliss statement is kind of true for a lot of people. But I have two quick things. I also was reading through Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Great. I've read it before, but I just kind of skimmed through it again today. But on chapter 4, I've never heard of this before, but it really seriously disturbed me. I don't know if you ever heard of it. You might have. It's called Piraya Metzitsa. It's a Jewish form of circumcision. It's not the way we think of it nowadays. It's a rabbi or a mohel, whatever the official position is, using teeth to circumcise an infant. And I read it and I couldn't believe it. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around how that was even ever okay in any circumstance. And the disturbing thing was even more, he goes on to say, it was used in ancient times, which ancient times they get away with it a lot, I guess. But I guess all the way up to 2005, there was a case. I guess one of the moels or rabbis had herpes and actually caused it to infect several infants that he was giving it to in New York City. And it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it actually was something that was existing in modern day society. And people were giving their children willingly to a guy to perform this thing. And it was just mind blowing. Apparently the guy got in trouble for it, but even still, I couldn't believe it.
Well, I mean, there was just an article, I think, a few days ago about a Pennsylvania rabbi who's being sued because he accidentally severed the penis of a newborn boy during circumcision.
I just thought that was really weird to me. But the only other thing I had, I'm sure you heard about the Pope saying that hell is not literal recently.
Yeah.
I just thought I could get a quick little opinion on how you thought about that.
Well, I think he's been rebuffed. If you can rebuff the Pope, at first it was, or was that when he said that atheists can earn heaven, and he was sort of rebuffed about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say Pope Francis has been interesting to watch because he seems to be, to a degree, marching a little bit at least to his own drummer. it's still impossible to root for the guy because he is the head of a $170 billion business that has been involved in the cover-up of the priestly abuse of children and all that kind of stuff. But there are a couple things about him I honestly must admit have caused me to raise an eyebrow and say, go figure. I mean, that took some brass. So we'll watch him close in the new year.
Cool. Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening, man. I appreciate the call. Thanks for being a part of the show.
I appreciate it, Seth. Thanks.
All right, take it easy. It's funny he should bring up the circumcision thing because Hitch himself weighed in on that very subject.
There are things that no morally normal person would think of doing if it wasn't that they believed in religion or in divine instruction. Take a transcendent experience that I'm sure a lot of you have had. I've had 3 times. Hold a newborn baby in your hands. So here's this bundle. You look at the little indentations and the earlobes that it's impressed Whittaker chambers and all that. And then you should be getting on with parenting. But no. First, let's find a sharp stone or a knife and start hacking at the genitalia. Because after it turns out the design isn't that great. And in a crucial feature, too. It needs to be sawn away. A lot of it needs to be sawn away. No morally decent person would do this if it wasn't for superstition.
It brings up the issue of morality, which you and I, if we are in the debate arena, have to deal with quite a bit. In fact, it's exhausting. How often I hear, where do your morals come from? How do you have any sort of moral barometer? In some ways, it's a lazy attempt to sort of end the conversation before it begins and to really by design paint the non-religious person as immoral, right? It gives the religious person this sort of a papier-mâché mountain to stand upon, a mountain of no substance, and say, where do your morals come from? How are you a moral creature if you don't have religion? Well, the Heritage Foundation is always a reliable source of opinion in this matter. In January of '96, Dr. Patrick Fagan, PhD, had an article called Why Religion Matters, the Impact of Religious Practice on Social Stability. And I'll just read from the article directly. It says this: America has always been a religious country. Its first Christian inhabitants were only too anxious to explain what they were doing and why, explains historian Paul Johnson. In a way, the first American settlers were like the ancient Israelites. They saw themselves as active agents of divine providence. Today, he adds, it is generally accepted that more than half of the American people still attend a place of worship over a weekend, an index of religious practice unequaled anywhere in the world, certainly in a great and populous nation. At the heart of religious practice is prayer. Americans pray even more than they go to church. According to a composite of surveys, 94% of blacks, 91% of women, 87% of whites, and 85% of men regard themselves as people who pray regularly. Some 78% pray at least once per week. 57% pray daily. Even among the 13% of the population who call themselves agnostics or atheists, some 20% pray daily. When policymakers consider America's grave social problems, including violent crime and rising illegitimacy, substance abuse, and welfare dependency, they should heed the findings in the professional literature of the social sciences on the positive consequences that flow from the practice of religion. The article continues. For example, there's ample evidence that the strength of the family unit is intertwined with the practice of religion. Churchgoers are more likely to be married. And you're like me, right? You're listening to the information and you're already thinking of the straw men that they just set up. Or you're thinking about the misuse of labels. All right, family. Okay, now because you're automatically married, you're more moral, you're more stable. Really? You're less likely to be divorced or single, back to the article. More likely to manifest high levels of satisfaction in marriage. Church attendance is the most important predictor of marital stability and happiness. The regular practice of religion helps poor persons move out of poverty. Regular church attendance, for example, is particularly instrumental in helping young people to escape the poverty of inner city life. Religious belief and practice contribute substantially to the formation of personal moral criteria and sound moral judgment. It does make one wonder if this person has read the Bible. Regular religious practice generally inoculates individuals against a host of social problems, including suicide, drug abuse, out-of-wedlock births, crime, and divorce. The regular practice of religion also encourages such beneficial effects on mental health as less depression, a modern epidemic, more self-esteem, and greater family and marital happiness. In repairing damage caused by alcoholism, drug addiction, and marital breakdown, religious beliefs and practice are a major source of strength and recovery. Regular practice of religion is good for personal physical health. It increases longevity, improves one's chances of recovery from illness, and lessens the incidence of many killer diseases. The article goes on and on. The last line says, such evidence indicates clearly that religious practice contributes significantly to the quality of American life. Now, could any of the things mentioned that were actually spoken about correctly and not misused? Like, how does going to church inoculate you against disease? Well, are we speaking about the practices? Are we talking about sexuality? Are we talking about, what are you talking about? Because when I was in the church and they had prayer time every Sunday, you know what those prayer requests were largely for? Cancer, organ failure, heart attack, diabetes. Oh yeah, so-and-so they're in rehab after a breakdown, after alcoholism or substance abuse. When I was in religious school, Christian school, my senior year, the superintendent had to resign. He didn't have to, but I think he had to. He had to resign because his daughter got pregnant. He stepped down mid-year. Teen pregnancy? I mean, we had the same stuff going on in our lives everybody else had going on in their lives. You want to see a party? Go to a party put on by somebody going to a private religious school. Trust me. They're not sitting around singing Kumbaya, holding hands and reading Bible verses. Largely, they are breaking out the booze and doing what young people do. Their religion and their participation, not just weekly, not just once a week, but daily. In a daily Christian school, by the way, you're praying 8 times a day, 1 for each class, and you're going to Wednesday chapel, and you're doing Sunday church. And that did not inoculate them against all of this supposedly detrimental, damaging stuff. The moral decline. Man, I can think of, I won't say his name, but I mean, there's one guy I know. I mean, wow. I mean, honestly, if he's still alive today, I mean, he talk about living hard. All out, no apology, out of control. And, he was on stage. There was one, I don't even remember exactly what the context of the show was, but it was in the auditorium at this Christian school, and he was front and center. I don't remember if he was the MC, but he could sing, and he was out there. He just brought the house down, and everybody was wailing and raising their hands and cheering and praise God. And I thought, if you people only knew. Austin Klein at About.com published an article on the subject. It says this: created by the Economist Intelligence Unit for the Institute of Economics and Peace, the Global Peace Index evaluates the peacefulness of a nation based on 23 criteria, including foreign wars, internal conflicts, human rights, murders, prison population, and democracy. New Zealand beat out Iceland for the safest nation, and the United States came in at just 83rd. Looking at the results as a whole, though, reveals something interesting. The most peaceful nations have a larger population of atheists and a smaller population of regular churchgoers than the least peaceful nations. Coincidence? Sure enough, peaceful countries have more atheists and fewer regular worshippers. The difference is highly statistically significant. In other words, it's real, not just a chance finding. Now, there are several possible reasons for this. It could be that people living in turbulent countries turn to religion. Or it could be that religion is not a good way to structure modern society. Or it could be that some other factor or combination of factors, democracy, free speech, education, government, welfare, generate citizens who are both peaceful and non-religious. Whatever the ultimate causes of such dramatic differences in peace and turmoil in secular versus religious nations, the correlation is too strong and too consistent to be ignored. This is one more bit of data which, at the very least, disproves the all-too-popular lie used by so many religious apologists that religion is necessary for morality and secularism is dangerous to morality, civility, or peace. Even if we can't argue that secularism leads to peace or religion leads to turmoil, we can definitely argue that there is no increase in turmoil and crime or decrease in morality when a nation becomes more secular and more atheist. This is an argument based on evidence from multiple types of studies done all around the world. In contrast, those who claim that atheism and secularism are a problem for morality, peace, or civil society do so based entirely on personal prejudice and bigotry. They have absolutely no facts or data whatsoever to support what they're saying. Then again, they also don't have any facts or data to support their own underlying religious claims. So the absence of facts for their allegations about atheists can't be expected to trouble them. Area code 607. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
This is John from upstate New York again. Good to hear from you.
Thank you for calling and Happy New Year. We're talking about religion. Does it poison everything?
Oh, there's an interesting story about that. I mean, religion tries to present itself as a unifying factor. Well, to me, it just seems to be more of a divider than anything else. And I'll give you a prime example. This week, as we were in New York City for the ball dropping for the new year, on our way back on the Jersey train, there was a person from India, apparently, and sitting across from him, I'm not sure if he was a religious leader, but he was a Muslim. And this person from India could barely speak a lick of English. And this guy, this Muslim person, was trying to ask him, "You're from India? Are your parents Christian? Are your parents Muslim?" And he finally got the gist of what he was trying to say and said that he was Christian. And then this guy, just in the middle of the train, just goes off on him about, how is it that you can be Christian? How is it that you can go against the natural order brought by Islam? And, he tried to ask this person, is your family Muslim? Is your family Christian? And just this whole time I'm listening to this guy going off on this poor guy who barely speaks English. The whole time I'm listening, it's just like, isn't one of the cardinal truths of religion to try to get everyone together? This doesn't seem like togetherness to me. What do you think?
Do I think religion's designed to bring people together?
Well, I mean, religions try to say that they are designed to bring people together.
Well, define together. If you're
Right.
talking about allegiance, if you're talking about co-opting people into your dogma, into your belief system, then yeah. But is religion wired to bring people together? No, I think religion is a hugely dividing force. I think it divides people based on any number of factors. I think religion it's like a superiority complex with a religious symbol on top of it. And they find reasons to be better, more moral, more sanctimonious, and to divide themselves from those that they maybe don't understand or simply disagree with, often out of ignorance. So, no, I think religion is a divider. I think it just goes out and draws those lines of demarcation, absolutely.
And I I think that those two people that I saw just yesterday on the New Jersey Transit, I mean, that seems like a prime example of how religion acts more like of a divider, don't you think?
I think it's more interesting to watch the response. Look, if the religious person had said, I believe in Allah and the Qur'an is perfect and all of this, and the other guy had said, well, I'm a Christian, and the Muslim guy had said, well, I totally disagree with you, but, hey, whatever. Or even if he was, genuinely concerned for his welfare without raising his voice, I mean, that tells you something, a little something about the position he's standing on. But if that guy just freaks out, if he hits the roof, if he can't abide the idea that somebody sitting next to him might disagree with his religious view, and he can't wait, he can't function until that person's mind is changed, I think that reveals a whole lot more about the person who is positing their religious belief than it does anybody else in the bus. It tells you that they are so insecure that they cannot abide a disagreeing opinion. They must have confirmation all around them or they flip out. I think it reveals a lot about them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hey, thanks for calling the show, and Happy New Year, man, okay?
And Happy New Year to you, too, Seth.
See you later. I don't know how many times I've been in a conversation with somebody, and my atheism might come up. And you should see the demeanor change. Their disposition changes, their body language changes, the tone of their voice. They start to vibrate. They can't sit still. They look seriously agitated. Not necessarily even angry, but it is so uncomfortable. There's an atheist sitting right next to them. And they feel, first of all, a huge knee-jerk reaction that they must proclaim all of the basic tenets of their faith. Well, I absolutely believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe he came to earth 2,000 years ago, and I believe the stories in the Bible are absolutely true and divinely inspired. And I thank Jesus. I thank Jesus for you. I thank Jesus for my life, for my children. I thank Jesus for all the blessings in my life. And I just know you can't look around this world and not know that God doesn't exist. You got to know. I'm going to pray for you. Right? You ever had that happen? You know what? I'm going to pray God's going to reveal himself to you, and I'm going to believe it and claim it. I just know he is going to show himself to you. Now, I didn't do a thing. I was just sitting there. Right? They tell me they're a Christian. I'm like, oh, all right. Cool. Where do you go to church? All right, cool. I tell them I'm an atheist, and they go thermonuclear. So what does that say about their disposition? They can't stand being so close to someone who disagrees with them. And if we start talking logic, we start talking evidence. Hey, by the way, you believe the Bible? Yeah. Who wrote the book of Genesis? I don't know. Hey, what are the 10 commandments? Can you name all 10? How do you explain the incongruencies in the New Testament story of Jesus' birth? Oh, I don't know. You know what? I'll pray for you. I'm going to pray for you. Bye. I don't know. I got off on a tangent there. Another great soundbite from Hitchens. This one's a little bit longer. It's about 3 minutes plus, a little over 3 minutes, but I wanted to play it all. He was referencing Stephen Jay Gould and the idea that religion and science could sort of coexist, right? The religious and the non-religious, the analytical evidence-based world and the religious world. Can they coexist? Well, Hitchens weighed in.
I'm coming now to the point that I warned Tony I wanted to stress, and we're going to talk about later, of the famous observation made by Stephen Jay Gould, wonderful biologist and paleontologist, that religion and science are non-overlapping magisteria, as he put it. There's no necessary reason why they should be in conflict. The two ideas can coexist in the same mind. I was a great admirer of Gould's, but I think I want to disagree, and here's how. Of course, a great scientist can also be a person of faith. Joseph Priestley, for example, who more or less discovered oxygen, as we understand it, and whose laboratory was smashed for profanity by monarchist and loyalist mobs in Birmingham and drove him over to Philadelphia. He was a Unitarian, a great man of science and the Enlightenment, but he believed in the phlogiston theory. Alfred Russel Wallace, who did most of Darwin's early work for him, not just on selection, but on continental drift as well, working to your near north that you used to call the Far East, Indonesia, loved nothing better than spiritualist seances. Really liked a bit of table turning and table rapping and burblings from the beyond to sweeten his day. The greatest scientist Cambridge ever produced, possibly, arguably, Sir Isaac Newton, was an alchemist who kept a furnace permanently going in his rooms, which he several times set fire to, in case the moment would come when he would work out how to turn lead into gold. Believed that the Catholic Church was the Antichrist, may have been onto something. Was obsessed with the measurements of he thought it would be better to know the measurements of the original temple than to find out about gravitational theory. Anyway, but a great scientist. It goes on. And there were many brilliant German physicists, rivals and contemporaries of Einstein, working in the same field, who believed that there was Aryan science and Jewish science, and there were two different types of physics. So, of course, these things can coexist. But it seems to me that it's not a matter of their coexistence or their overlap as to whether or not they are compatible, whether or not they're ultimately reconcilable. For example, I'm talking now not just about what people think, but about how. It was a Catholic, not just a Catholic physicist, but actually a man in holy orders, Georges Lemaitre of the University of Louvain, who in the 20s anticipated the idea of the Big Bang, quarreled with Einstein about it, said that he didn't call it the Big Bang, that comes later. He thought of it as the egg from which the universe suddenly burst. And was right. And Einstein had to admit that he was probably the first to get onto this use of the theory of relativity. He took it to the Pope. Pope Pius XI it was, and the Pope was so impressed, being warned that this theory was likely, that he offered to Father Lemaitre, Professor Lemaitre, he said, if you like, I'll make it dogma. I'll say that people have to believe it. He said, well, actually, it's very nice of you, Your Holiness, but that would be sort of missing the point of a scientific experiment. That's what I mean by saying this mentality is not congruent, not compatible. It's not really reconcilable. And I think we're going to increasingly have to face this, whether we're driven by evidence or by reasoning.
Before I get our next phone call, and we're going to finish with an article, I'm actually just going to just read it. An article that's written by Hitch, I think a few years before his death. I wanted to do some due diligence here because people are already asking me about it. When the moral fiber that is supposedly provided by religion, I was talking about being in school and the party atmosphere and how we had all of the same prayer requests for the same diseases that everybody in the secular world was supposed to be at the mercy of. Another thing that had popped up was the divorce rate, and the assertion, even in the original article I had read at the beginning of the show, from the Heritage Foundation about how religion protects people from divorce. Well, the statistics show otherwise. Now, this study was, it's not extremely new. It was 1999, the Barna Research Group. They are an evangelical Christian organization. They do surveys and research to better understand what Christians believe and how they live. And they discovered that actually the divorce rate among Christians is higher than atheists. 27% of born-again Christians had at least one divorce. 21% of atheists have been divorced. In fact, the atheist actually has a lower divorce rate than Mormons, mainstream Protestants, Baptists, non-denominational. So the idea that religion has protected them from divorce is just bogus. And also keep in mind that much of what they consider to be immorality is actually just a misunderstanding of the natural world. I remember being in a church service once and they showed a video about a guy who went to a clinic or camp of some kind to fix the fact that he was gay. They were going to cure him of his homosexuality, and that's what they sold to this audience. And the guy was absolutely convincing. He talked about all the things that he'd done when he was a homosexual, and all of these perverse and abhorrent acts, blah, blah, blah. And then he went in, And he surrendered himself to Jesus, and he went into this program. And I think it was like a several-month program. And at the end of it, he realized that homosexuality was not what God had intended, and that now he is hetero. And there's hope for you out there if you're gay, right? So what they had seen as sort of aberrant, perverse, immoral behavior was not immoral at all. They were natural expressions of sexuality that were called, branded by the church as immoral. Well, if that's what they're calling immoral, they've got their terminology completely wrong. And it's amazing how little the church understands about moral problems. I remember when we were doing our fundraiser for responsible charity, the founder's name is Hamley Gonzalez. And I bring him up from time to time, but he had been involved before he founded Responsible Charity. He had been involved with Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity. And he saw behind the scenes that this religious, quote-unquote, solution to poverty and sickness and suffering and oppression was actually causing more of it. It was Mother Teresa. Of course, everybody around you goes, how could you say anything terrible about Mother Teresa? It's Mother Teresa. I was the same way. I didn't know anything about Mother Teresa. The first time I heard Christopher Hitchens call her on the carpet, called her all sorts of stuff. I thought, it's Mother Teresa. I had already bought and I'd already committed myself to knowing that she was an amazing person. She's Mother Teresa. Look, she's a little old lady who lives in poverty, quote unquote, lives in poverty. Yeah, right. I don't know the first thing about her. I'd started with the answer before I asked the questions about who she was. And then, of course, you go in behind the scenes and you realize that, you know what? There's nothing going on there that religion is helping. I often have this conversation about people who do mission trips. And, churches do a lot of good stuff. And this is unpopular to say for a lot of people, but deal with it. Churches do a lot of good stuff. However, and of course, watch somebody grab that soundbite out of context. However, there's nothing that they are doing that could not be done outside of the religious context. If they go to a third world country and they build houses, if they dig wells, if they bring food, if they have doctors flown in and provide medicine, if they put in a school, they're bringing benefit. Unfortunately, quite often they're trying to meet physical needs so that they can then come in afterward and sell their God and their holy books and their dogma and their salvation message. But on the front end of that, the good they're doing is real. And I believe it's quite often, almost in fact, in most cases, I believe it's motivated by genuine goodness in the hearts of people who want to go out and alleviate suffering in this world. They're misguided, but they're sincerely misguided. They want to help people. They love people. Not everybody who's religious is a hater. But I could go down to some place and I could provide food and I could provide clean water and I could help build shelters and homes and we could bring physicians in and provide medicine. We could educate. We could do all these things and religion doesn't even have to show up. In fact, when you look at the mission trips where these people are in all of these places all around the world doing what they do, it's human beings doing all the lifting anyway. They invoke God, they speak the language of God, they pepper everything they do with godly sounding stuff, but they're the ones with their hands dirty. They're the ones getting on a plane and spending the money, bringing the resources over. They're the ones digging the wells. They're the ones who are treating the wounds. They're the ones who are helping. And in fact, religion, because I believe it is a distraction from the goodness that's happening. What a beautiful act. What a beautiful gesture to go and give life to somebody. Why taint it by pitching your myth? I have just grabbed your hand and I've given you a moment of compassion. You're hungry. I just brought you a meal. You know what? I brought resources so that you'll have meals for weeks and months to come. Here's a filter that you can put your water in so you'll have something to drink. I know you got it rough, and I care, and I want to do something for you. What a beautiful moment that is. What a beautiful moment. I don't know who you are. I don't even know your name. I don't know anything about your culture. I come from another part of the world. I just want to help. Oh, it's beautiful. And you know, Jesus loves you with all of his heart. Oh. Oh. You ruined it. Or at least you diminished it. You know what? I'm going to leave you a Bible. I want you to read this. I know you're just a 9-year-old person who will think this is the most boring thing ever written. But it's my gift to you. Don't you think these people would rather have a genuine touch of compassion, laughter, health, than those scribblings of Iron Age goat herders? You know, they deflated their own balloon. In my opinion, in that instance, religion poisoned what was a beautiful thing. Had an email from someone who left the email unsigned, said, as a former Christian, I feel Hitchens was right. Nothing is a simple question of right and wrong action when religion's involved. For one thing, the religious can't even agree with one another, much less people of another religion, and certainly not the unreligious. It becomes a matter of any one person's interpretation of a very contradictory Bible. Example, one person may say because the Bible says homosexuality is a sin, they're against it. They may insist they aren't being judgmental, just agreeing with the Bible. Another says Jesus never condemned homosexuality and said this one commandment, give I you, love one another. So they say homosexuality is not a sin. Now, a non-believer would simply ask themselves if it hurts anyone for two consenting adults to love one another. No. Next question. Would I want anyone to pass judgment on me for living my life and not bothering anyone else? Also, no. Therefore, without religion, two questions find a simple conclusion. With religion, we argue for centuries and commit hate crimes against those our faith condemns, thinking we have the backing of a father figure in the sky. Ian says, in response to this week's topic, I wanted to say that one positive thing religion's given us is a good deal to laugh at. Once I came to my senses and realized religion's completely bogus, my fresh point of view allowed me to look at the subject with new eyes. And man, it was hilarious. It became fun to read through the Bible or other texts and find gaping plot holes, contradictions, and other total nonsense. I thank religion for providing fuel for the comedic fire, and I think people like Carlin or Marr owe a lot to religion's existence, or else their comedy careers would essentially be non-existent, like God. Mike says, I'm incredibly grateful to Hitchens because of his chapter, There Is No Eastern Solution, and God is Not Great. I'd stopped going to church years ago, but got caught up in Buddhism, which seemed different. It says you can attain peace by letting go of your attachments, which is basically all of your emotions. However, there are Buddhist leaders who have had inappropriate sexual relationships. One was recently removed from his post at a place in Nebraska somewhere. But there have also been such incidents in California, Minnesota, and maybe a few others I don't know about. Buddhism was also used to justify the war effort in World War II. It had never occurred to me to ask whether that sort of thing was the kind of behavior you'd expect from someone who had let go and attained peace. Only someone as bold and unrelenting as Hitchens would go there and point this out. In fact, the people I met are all pretty normal. I just think they're wasting their time. I'm no longer convinced that meditating did anything in my life more than prayer would have, i.e. not much at all. I can't find much benefit in my life at all. I would feel more peaceful for a little while, but can that be explained as relaxation? Bob sent an email and said, my first thought is one of scale. On a large scale, religion harms in terms of wars, bigotry, persecution, and all the usual crimes against humanity. On a smaller scale, there are examples of good: food banks, bookmobiles, toy drives, soup kitchens, missions, services, etc. It's true that all of the good things could be and likely would still happen without the influence of religion. If no religion had ever existed, we'd all still be charitable. I think it's a natural instinct to try to protect one another. Humans are tribal. But many people engage in these activities because of their religious views. They want to be better Christians or Muslims or Pastafarians or whatever their denomination. They're either demonstrating that their religion is inherently good or performing deeds to secure their place in paradise. So to that extent, it isn't always poison. The reality is that overall religion causes otherwise good people to take positions or actions which are hateful and harmful. They perform evil in the name of righteousness and believe they're better people for it. Historically, religion has slaughtered millions, possibly billions. And they're rarely satisfied to simply kill their enemies. They have to make the deaths as grotesque and painful as their imaginations can produce. Often they make the family members of their victims take part in the executions, ensuring the emotional scarring would continue for generations. I think of the bronze bull or the wicker man as examples of hideous executions, but as simple as hanging with a short rope so that the condemned slowly strangles rather than dying of a broken neck, boiling in oil, drowning, crucifixion, impaling, burning, stoning. The list just goes on and on. And we haven't even scratched the surface of what priests get up to with children or the enormous portions of society that have been oppressed by religion. Don't forget, quote, "It's disgraceful for a woman to speak in church. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home," unquote, 1 Corinthians 14. You could make up an entire podcast just quoting awful Bible verses. We actually did that, Bob. It's called the Bloody Bible. It's awesome. On the whole, Bob says religion's poison. There are good religious people, but the organization is and always has been immoral. I've sometimes thought that if there actually were a devil, wouldn't religion be its greatest achievement? To inspire honest, good people to hate and violence. If there was an afterlife and you wanted to enjoy any part of it, you should probably stay far away from any building with stained glass windows in it. You know, I'm surrounded by religious people. They're not violent people. They love people. They're peaceful people. Quite often they shy away or blanch at things they don't understand, which is a lot. And many times they do stupid or destructive things based on ignorance. But they're not bad people. I want to finish the show tonight with an article that was originally printed in Slate on the 25th of April, 2007 by Christopher Hitchens. Just going to go with the Hitchens thing for the rest of the show tonight. It's not a short article. It's not a hugely long one, but I'm just going to read the whole thing to you. The article was called "God is Not Great," and it reads like this. There are 4 irreducible objections to religious faith. That it wholly misrepresents the origins of man and the cosmos. That because of this original error, it manages to combine the maximum of servility with the maximum of solipsism. That it's both the result and the cause of dangerous sexual repression. And that it is ultimately grounded on wish thinking. I do not think it's arrogant of me to claim that I had already discovered these 4 objections, as well as noticed the more vulgar and obvious fact that religion is used by those in temporal charge to invest themselves with authority. Before my boyish voice had broken, I'm morally certain that millions of other people came to very similar conclusions in very much the same way. And I've since met such people in hundreds of places and in dozens of different countries. Many of them never believed, and many of them abandoned faith after a difficult struggle. Some of them had blinding moments of unconviction that were every bit as instantaneous, though perhaps less epileptic and apocalyptic, and later more rationally and more morally justified than Saul of Tarsus on the Damascus Road. And here's the point about myself and my co-thinkers. Our belief is not a belief. Our principles are not a faith. We do not rely solely upon science and reason, because these are necessary rather than sufficient factors, but we distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason. We may differ on many things, but what we respect is free inquiry, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of ideas for their own sake. We do not hold our convictions dogmatically. The disagreement between Professor Stephen Jay Gould and Professor Richard Dawkins concerning punctuated evolution and the unfilled gaps in post-Darwinian theory is quite wide as well as quite deep, but we shall resolve it by evidence and reasoning and not by mutual excommunication. My own annoyance at Professor Dawkins and Daniel Dennett for their cringe-making proposal that atheists should conceitedly nominate themselves to be called brights is part of a continuous argument. We're not immune to the lure of wonder and mystery and awe. We have music and art and literature and find that the serious ethical dilemmas are better handled by Shakespeare and Tolstoy and Schiller and Dostoevsky and George Eliot than in the mythical morality tales of the holy books. Literature, not scripture, sustains the mind, and since there is no other metaphor, also the soul. We do not believe in heaven or hell, yet no statistic will ever find that without these blandishments and threats we commit more crimes of greed or violence than the faithful. In fact, if a proper statistical inquiry could ever be made, I'm sure the evidence would be the other way. We're reconciled to living only once, except through our children, for whom we are perfectly happy to notice that we must make way and room. We speculate that it is at least possible that once people accepted the fact of their short and struggling lives, they might behave better toward each other and not worse. We believe with certainty that an ethical life can be lived without religion. And we know for a fact that the corollary holds true, that religion has caused innumerable people not just to conduct themselves no better than others, but to award themselves permission to behave in ways that would make a brothel keeper or ethnic cleanser raise an eyebrow. Most important of all, perhaps we infidels do not need any machinery of reinforcement. We are those who Blaise Pascal took into account when he wrote to the one who says, "I am so made that I cannot believe." There is no need for us to gather every day or every 7 days or on any high and auspicious day to proclaim our rectitude or to grovel and wallow in our unworthiness. We atheists do not require any priests or any hierarchy above them to police our doctrine. Sacrifices and ceremonies are abhorrent to us, as are relics and the worship of any images or objects, even including objects in the form of one of man's most useful innovations, the bound book. To us, no spot on earth is or could be holier than another. To the ostentatious absurdity of the pilgrimage or the plain horror of killing civilians in the name of some sacred wall or cave or shrine or rock, we can counterpose a leisurely or urgent walk from one side of the library or the gallery to another, or to lunch with an agreeable friend in pursuit of truth or beauty. Some of these excursions to the bookshelf or the lunch or the gallery will obviously, if they're serious, bring us into contact with belief and believers. From the great devotional painters and composers to the works of Augustine, Aquinas, and Newman. These mighty scholars may have written many evil things or many foolish things and have been laughably ignorant of the germ theory of disease or the place of the terrestrial globe in the solar system, let alone the universe, and this is the plain reason why there are no more of them today, and why there will be no more of them tomorrow. Religion spoke its last intelligible or noble or inspiring words a long time ago. Either that or it mutated into an admirable but nebulous humanism, as did, say, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a brave Lutheran pastor hanged by the Nazis for his refusal to collude with them. We shall have no more prophets or sages from the ancient quarter, which is why the devotions of today are only the echoing repetitions of yesterday, sometimes ratcheted up to screaming point so as to ward off the terrible emptiness. While some religious apology is magnificent in its limited way, one might cite Pascal, and some of it's dreary and absurd. Here one cannot avoid naming C.S. Lewis. Both styles have something in common, namely the appalling load of strain that they have to bear. How much effort it takes to affirm the incredible. The Aztecs had to tear open a human chest cavity every day just to make sure that the sun would rise. Monotheists are supposed to pester their deity more times than that, perhaps, lest he be deaf. How much vanity must be concealed, not too effectively at that, in order to pretend that one is the personal object of a divine plan? How much self-respect must be sacrificed in order that one may squirm continually in an awareness of one's own sin? How many needless assumptions must be made? And how much contortion is required to receive every new insight of science and to manipulate it so as to fit with the revealed words of ancient man-made deities? How many saints and miracles and councils and conclaves are required in order first to be able to establish a dogma, and then, after infinite pain and loss and absurdity and cruelty, to be forced to rescind one of those dogmas? God did not create man in his own image. Evidently, it was the other way about, which is the painless explanation for the profusion of gods and religions, with a fratricide both between and among faiths that we see all about us, and that has so retarded the development of civilization. The mildest criticism of religion is also the most radical and the most devastating one. Religion is man-made. Even the men who made it cannot agree on what their prophets or redeemers or gurus actually said or did. Still less can they hope to tell us the meaning of later discoveries and developments which were, when they began, either obstructed by their religions or denounced by them. And yet the believers still claim to know. Not just to know, but to know everything. Not just to know that God exists and that he created and supervised the whole enterprise, but also to know what he demands of us. From our diet, to our observances, to our sexual morality. In other words, in a vast and complicated discussion where we know more and more about less and less, yet can still hope for some enlightenment as we proceed, one faction, itself composed of mutually warring factions, has the sheer arrogance to tell us that we already have all the essential information we need. Such stupidity, combined with such pride, should be enough on its own to exclude belief from the debate. The person who is certain and who claims divine warrant for his certainty belongs now to the infancy of our species. It may be a long farewell, but it has begun, and like all farewells, should not be protracted. The argument with faith is the foundation and origin of all arguments because it is the beginning, but not the end, of all arguments about philosophy, science, history, and human nature. It is also the beginning, but by no means the end, of all disputes about the good life and the just city. Religious faith is, precisely because we are still evolving creatures, ineradicable. It will never die out, or at least not until we get over our fear of death, and of the dark, and of the unknown, and of each other. For this reason, I would not prohibit it, even if I thought I could. Very generous of me, you may say. But will the religious grant me the same indulgence? I ask because there is a real and serious difference between me and my religious friends, and the real and serious friends are sufficiently honest to admit it. I would be quite content to go to their children's bar mitzvahs, to marvel at their Gothic cathedrals, to, quote, respect their belief that the Qur'an was dictated, though exclusively in Arabic, to an illiterate merchant, or to interest myself in Wicca and Hindu and Jain constellations. And as it happens, I will continue to do this without insisting on the polite reciprocal condition, which is that they in turn leave me alone. But this religion is ultimately incapable of doing. As I write these words, and as you read them or hear them, people of faith are in their different ways planning your and my destruction, and the destruction of all the hard-won human attainments that I've touched upon. Religion poisons everything. I suspect this is the beginning and not the end of a very complex discussion on a very complex issue. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for kicking off the new year with me. Looking forward to amazing things in 2014. And I will see you next Tuesday night on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.